Well, welcome to 10-Minute Record Reviews, and this is another compulsive sharing moment. This is the fifth one in the series, I think, and it's coming to you from the fabulous interiors of the Fort Garry Hotel in Winnipeg, Manitoba, the capital city of the province. My intention had been to do a review as usual this week, but because I'm on this business trip, that wasn't really possible. So I thought, well, I do have some content though, because when I go on business, one thing I like to do to dull the pain of actually being on a business trip is to go to record stores. And I've spent considerable amount of time in Toronto and Winnipeg in the last 10 days. And I've been to a few record stores. So I thought I would maybe reflect a bit on the record buying scene in both those locations and, of course, show you what I bought. So here we go. So Toronto was first, and I was there for about a week. The record buying scene in Toronto is largely centered in the, I guess, kind of west central area of the city, along Dundas, along Spadina, and particularly along Queen Street West. Now, Toronto has a lot of record stores, and I wasn't just looking for any old records, so I'd done a little bit of pre-research to figure out where the better stores were to buy vintage jazz, which was what, in general, I was looking for. My particular buying jag at the moment is looking for early original or very early pressings of contemporary and Pacific, sort of West Coast jazz. But I have other, bits of kryptonite in me. So if I find original impulse releases, which I don't have, I'm prone to buy those and so on. And in general, it's always good to be open to being surprised. In that week, I was able to find 3 chunks of time to go out record shopping, and these are the places that I went. I'll quickly talk about the record stores that I went to and didn't buy anything first. So the first of those was Cops Records on Queen Street, which is a great store, frankly, nicely curated, but it tends to focus on new vinyl, particularly for jazz. As far as I could tell, what they had for inventory was new reissues of, things like the new Tone Poets and so on, which is great if that's what you're looking for. In fact, if you are looking for that, probably the place to go. But I wasn't really shopping for that. I wasn't their market, so I thanked them and I was on my way. I also went to Invisible City, which is on Spadina. It's kind of hard to find because it's in this kind of well, just in the Chinatown area, and you sort of have to go down this staircase that you can't really see from the street. Anyway, it's quite a substantial place, and it's actually pretty impressive the collection they have there. Whoever runs that store knows a lot about music and has a pretty robust jazz collection. That said, considering the albums that they had available, I found the prices to be kind of expensive, so I held off. Then I went to Sonic Boom, which is a huge store in Spadina, full of new stuff, full of old stuff. They got a big kind of basement area with lots of used records. Their used jazz selection is huge, but it was kind of picked over, if you know what I mean. I mean, that can happen to any record store. They get some great selections and some great, estate sales and so on. They sell off the good stuff. This felt like they hadn't had a really good sort of influx of old records in a while. And there were a few maybes, but no kind of holy cow moments, when you suddenly come across something, you go, whoa, I can't believe this is here. And I've been looking at this for ages. Anyway, no moments there. Another place I went and didn't buy anything was on Ossington, and that's Rotate This. Now, Rotate This was probably the victim of the fact that I had been walking all day and going to record stores a lot that day, and I was kind of tired and needed to get somewhere else. I didn't have that much time there, but I did flip through their jazz inventory, and again, it felt a little bit picked over, like again, I was kind of there maybe at the wrong moment. Anyway, now let's talk about some places where I did find some records. And the first of those was a place called Para Music, which is a funny little store off Yonge Street. Looks like it probably ought to have been a tailor's or a dry cleaner's or something, run by the classic, grumpy record store owner that doesn't really interact with you much. So, a store that sort of where the attitude and the whole disposition seems to defy all economic models. But there they were, and some real gems in the used jazz section. What I got there were a couple of records. First of all, this from J.J. Johnson. This is a 1956, I think it's either original pressing or a very rapid repress thereafter, like maybe like the second pressing or something. J is for jazz. This is on Columbia with, the nice, I always love this, the 6i label. Anyway, that was a bit of a score. And so was this one, the Marion McPartland Trio. This is one of her very earliest releases. She was quite active in the 50s, and then she got very involved in doing a regular radio broadcast on NPR in the States about, I think, jazz piano. Anyway, a lot of people were introduced to jazz on piano through listening to her regular radio show. But she's got a great little trio here, and it includes Joe Morello on drums. Now, the interesting feature here is that Joe Morello, who of course was subsequently Dave Brubeck's drummer during the classic period of the Brubeck Quartet, had been carrying on an affair with Marion, much to the ultimate dismay of his wife and I guess of Jimmy Partland, her husband. Anyway, they had to break it off, and that's why he ends up leaving the trio. But the music is actually really, really good on this. It's one of the nicest little piano trio records that I've ever come across. And in fact, I think somebody had mentioned it to me. I did a thing on piano trios a while ago on the channel. Somebody had recommended some of her work, which I didn't really know. Anyway, totally, totally endorse this. I haven't listened to it yet. Obviously, I've just bought it, but I have heard on Tidal and Spotify and so on, and I can confirm that the music is excellent. So that was Paramusic. Next, I went to a funny place called Play de Record, Play and then DE Record on Spadina. This is a small place on Spadina that is kind of a bit higgledy-piggledy. They have a really good value used jazz selection, but it's not separated by artists. It's all just kind of in stacks and in boxes, and you kind of have to literally get down on your knees on the floor and flip through. But again, there was gold in them. There are hills, or them there are bins. And here's what I scored here. 3 records, in fact. I told you that I was looking for early pressings of contemporary releases, and here's one. Andre Previn, Shelly Manne, and Red Mitchell, which is a great lineup. And this is from 1960, original pressing of their takes on West Side Story. Any original pressing of contemporary around this point, provided it's in decent condition, is going to have just excellent sound, not just because of the earliness of the pressing, but of course the work of Roy Dunan and Les Koenig. So that was a real win. I was very happy with this one too. Now it's a compilation and a reissue, which not always the kind of thing which excites me, but this is of Art Pepper's very first recordings for Discovery. It's a compilation of the sides that he cut for Discovery in 1952, which incidentally were the very first sessions which Dick Bach produced on his own. And subsequently, of course, as I mentioned in a recent video, he went on to found Pacific Records really just a few weeks later. So anyway, this is a compilation of all those sides that Pepper had with his tremendous group, which includes Hampton Hawes on piano, Joe Mondragon on bass, and Larry Bunker on drums, all big names in the West Coast scene. And it's pretty much impossible to get the early Discovery sides for anything less than large money. So to find them all compiled here for $7 or whatever I paid for this was a bit of a score. And the third record I picked up there was this one by another West Coast stalwart. It's a 10-inch record by Bill Holman. Now, all these guys on the West Coast, or many of them, came out of the Stan Kenton band, and this is Stan Kenton kind of impresarioing, basically being the impresario and sort of giving spotlight to some of the players in his orchestra, which I guess is a win-win. So this is the kind of West Coast jazz some people don't like, is it'll be heavily arranged. I haven't heard it yet, but I can almost tell. It'll be heavily arranged. There's quite a few folks in here. It's not a small band. It's not a big band. It's a somewhere in between band. I guess it's an octet. Anyway, looking forward to that one, because this is the kind of stuff that I'm really digging into at the moment. So Play Director was a great place to go. And I will also say that the staff in there were super knowledgeable, happy to chat about all kinds of things jazz-wise, and I really enjoyed it. In fact, I kind of had to tear myself out of there because I had to go somewhere in a hurry. So the next place that I went was Short Stack Records on Dundas Street West. Now, this is a place which is very small, but pretty high on quality. And what I dug up there was a couple of things. First of all, the only kind of non-original pressing, by the way, this was like a 1954 press of that 10-inch. Obviously, it's pre-55. The only kind of non-early record I got is this one. Now, this is a Ben Webster record, which originally came out in the 50s. This, I discovered, is a Book of the Month Club reissue from sometime in the late 70s, or more likely the early 80s. You can kind of tell by the kind of floppy vinyl. But nevertheless, it didn't have a barcode on it, so I thought, well, it's early enough. And it was a nice price, and the music is good, but it's not exactly, a collector's dream. However, I thought, why not? And then this one, which is an original pressing, this is 1957 original pressing by Dave Pell. And Dave Pell is a funny guy. He bounced around labels on the West Coast for a while, and he typically had an octet. He too, just like Holman, was writing fairly heavily arranged music with lots of players, and some of it does verge into, again, the kind of West Coast jazz that a lot of the East Coast fans will sort of say, yeah, this is really not very spontaneous. But I find myself weirdly attracted to this stuff as things go forward. So I'm kind of intrigued to hear this one. And there's a certain sound that these guys get that really isn't replicated anywhere else in the jazz canon. So that's kind of fun. As regards Toronto, I've saved the best for last because the best place that I went is a record store called Cosmos West. Now, it's important to note that Cosmos West is one of two Cosmos locations. They're quite near to each other. One is actually on Queen Street West, and the other is just off Queen Street West, and that's Cosmos Records West. The main store, Cosmos on Queen Street, deals with funk and soul and pop and so on. I don't know if they have any jazz. I didn't actually go there because I was making a specific beeline for Cosmos West because it is, as far as I can tell, the most robust and best curated collection of vintage jazz in the city. Toronto people, feel free to call me out in that one. There is another place called Vulver Records, which is a bit further west, but it's by appointment only, and I wasn't about to sort of do that dance, so whatever. But Cosmos West is great. It's run by a guy called Aki Abe. As a photograph of Aki and myself here. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. His store was recommended to me by a friend of mine, another collector, so I was going to make a point to go there. When I got there, I was very happy with what I found. Basically, there are some general used jazz bins, lots of them, and there was good stuff in there, although not necessarily anything which would mark it apart from other record stores. But then there were a couple, two or three rows of records which were labeled, collector's items, etc. And there was great stuff in there. I thought very fairly priced. And so here are some of the things that I got. I am kind of being a completist these days about contemporary. So I did buy a contemporary record there that maybe is a bit quirky. And this is this one. It's a soundtrack record by Shelly Manne. And this is a 1961 original pressing. It's a bit odd because being a soundtrack, it's got a whole bunch of very short tracks. So I don't quite know what to expect, although it does actually have some pretty good reviews out there. So I'm interested to see what this yields. I also found some impulses, which I am not quite a completist of, but I'm kind of getting that way. A fantastic, very minty looking Spartan, which is like an original Canadian pressing of J.J. Johnson's Proof Positive, again with a lovely laminated cover, really in very, very good shape. If you haven't seen the Spartan pressings, they look, it even has the original sort of Spartan sleeve, and Spartan pressings typically have this nice crimson label with gold lettering. Anyway, that is a real keeper, and I am completely delighted by this, as I'm a big J.J. Johnson fan and I'm a big Impulse fan. And then I found both copies, or at least both volumes, of this series done on Impulse, Americans in Europe. So here's volume 2. This is an original 1963 pressing. Again, it's a Spartan release, and Spartan were the licensees in Canada for Impulse, again with the absolutely pristine cover. This is a compilation, so it's people like Bud Powell and who else? Don Bias is on here, Idris Suleiman. So again, not all the people in here are household names, but the music is actually very interesting, and it's quite a variety too. So there's some trad on here as well, so on. Anyway, I'm very happy to get that. And I found also volume 1. Now this, as you can tell, with the lack of lamination, is not the original pressing. This is a 67 repress. I had it in my hand and I put it back thinking, well, I only really want to get the original. And I thought, well, when am I going to find them both in the same place? And I thought, carpe diem. So I picked this up, and if I do eventually find the original pressing, well, maybe I'll buy it, and maybe I won't. So that was Toronto. Then I moved on to Winnipeg. Now, I have not been in Winnipeg for very long, and I'm leaving tomorrow, so I really only had a couple days here. So I was kind of compressed. I didn't have the opportunity to look around, and some of the places I wanted to go to were shut. This was particularly true of a place called Old Gold, which, being a Monday, wasn't open, and I kind of feel that was an opportunity lost. But then I didn't see the inside of the store, so who knows? Anyway, didn't get to go there, and then there were kind of a couple of failure to launch places. One called the Vinyl Vault, which I went to but wasn't there. And apparently there's some debate on the internet as to whether this place actually exists or maybe somebody has just set it up as a troll thing on Google Maps. Anyway, maybe you are there, Vinyl Vault, but you're hard to find. And then I found a place called Eye and Ear Control Records. Now, of course, Eye and Ear Control is a very famous sort of proto free jazz record. And I thought, well, this has to be good if it's a record store called this. So I trudged over there a kilometer through the salty slush here in Winnipeg, only to find that it's a mail order place and you can't really get in. It's on the third floor of what looks like an old loft building kind of thing. So I was feeling a little bit disheartened. And then I found my way to Into the Music, and that made up for everything because Into the Music in Winnipeg is a proper record store. Just for the moment you go in, everything about it is what you want. It's sizable. It's got lots of old stuff, lots of new stuff. The staff seem to know what they're doing. They were playing good music. Everything about it, just the vibe was good. And the used jazz selection was pretty good. Again, a little bit of a picked over quality to it because there weren't too many aha moments going through it, but whoever was curating it was definitely gathering good stuff. I mean, if you didn't have a jazz collection, you're trying to start one, good place to go. But this was where I got the best find of the whole trip, strangely enough, really on my last day traveling, and that was this one, something I've been looking for quite a while, the 10-inch Tony Scott Quartet, released in 1954 and then not reissued again until I think the 70s in Japan and then maybe later on Brunswick Records. It's got Percy Heath on bass, Tony Scott, who of course is obviously a clarinetist and probably the last great exponent of the clarinet, a later generation, a younger generation than Benny Goodman, obviously, and people like that. And really just an excellent record and some very interesting treatments of particular of I Cover the Waterfront and also Goodbye, which is the signature tune that Goodman used to use to sort of sign off his concert. Anyway, and Blues for Ava on here, which is divided into part 1 and 2. But another one of his signature tunes. A great record, which was available for like $10 or $14 or something like that. It's in incredible shape. Anyway, this really was a holy cow moment, and I'm very, very happy. So Into the Music, great record store, and a great find there. So I was very happy. So that was my limited sojourn in Winnipeg. Anyway, that's a story. So I'm happy. I've got to figure out how to fit this all into my weight allotment in the aircraft when I check my bags in, but that's a problem for tomorrow. If you have other ideas about great places to go in Winnipeg or Toronto, please do put them in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time.